Okay, good afternoon. It's hard to believe it's November already. Two chilly mornings made it clear that the seasons were changing. And in colder parts of the country, things shut down with the onset of late fall and winter. But in zone 7 and warmer, we really have two growing seasons. And I tend to think of them as two growing seasons because there's some plants that take advantage of one season and others that take advantage of the other. In the two seasons in my mind are the frost-free time of the year and the time of the year when we do tend to have frost, or when frost is always a possibility. Everyone knows about the frost-free growing season, the spring to fall growing season, when all the standard plants grow, but then there are a lot of plants that don't come into growth or don't bloom until fall and continue through the winter months. Many of them are Mediterranean plants, and in their native habitats, they're making use of the winter moisture, and then they go dormant during the dry summer. But some of the plants that are growing actively in the winter are woodland plants that are dormant in the summer when the woodland floor is very shady, but in the winter when the leaves are off the trees, they make use of the winter sun. So the focus today will be on plants of this second growing season, the growing season when we tend to have frost. And as always, I will often go off topic. So as we go through the garden, we might stop and look at something of note, even if it's not specifically on this topic. And I do want to say that though you don't see much, if any, of Tim's a really big part of these tours as well. Well, let me first say one of the most prominent and delightful fragrances of the fall garden, the second growing season, is the tea olive, Osmanthus fragrans. Fragrans, of course, meaning fragrant. And even the name osmanthe, osmi means fragrant and anthus is flower. So it's the fragrant flower if you interpreted its scientific name. And they bloom in flushes. This one is blooming now for about the third time this fall. But I'm standing in front of a loquat, which is also fragrant. It's a softer but really nice fragrance. Fragrance reminds me of heliotrope, which also is similar to the fragrance of Johnson's baby powder. Now, I don't know if mothers nowadays use Johnson baby powder, but as the third oldest of 9, there are a lot of years of Johnson baby powder being applied to my younger siblings. Believe it or not, loquat is in the rose family, the Rosaceae. I always have to remind myself of that when I look at the plant, because the foliage sure doesn't look like a rose family member. And it's an evergreen, an evergreen tree. The flowers, if you look at an individual flower, they are 5-petaled like all members of the rose family. Well, I mangled that flower, but maybe amongst these you can see the flowers have 5 petals and many stamens. Loquat, of course, is in warmer parts of the world is grown for its edible fruit. There are many plants that have edible fruit that are edible but not worth eating, but the loquat fruit is really delicious. And summer of 2019, this had a great big crop, and we ate many of them. The fruit is apricot colored and about the size of a smallish apricot with one big stone in the center, one big seed in the center, but very worthwhile growing. We've collected a bunch of seed and we have some young plants which we'll make available next year. The fragrance is delightful. I think it's a gorgeous foliage plant and worth growing just for that. And I am going to go off topic because I didn't realize I was going to be standing next to this very odd cultivar, this selection of Nandina domestica. Let me pull out the label. So the cultivar is Enshu, E-N-S-H-U. And I wanted to talk about this Nandina because the Arboretum is embarking on a new display, classic Japanese display of plants called Koten Enge. It's a art form where very curious plants are displayed in very ornamental pots. And this very odd Nandina is typical of the type of plant that would be displayed in the Koten Enge container. Other plants used in Koten Enge are many of the unusual cultivars of Rhodia and Asarum. And what am I forgetting, Tim?
Ardesia?
Ardesia, of course, yes.
We have a few of those right now.
Yeah.
Some of the palms, like the rhapis palms, I think.
Yeah, the lady palm. Probably mostly ones with variegated foliage.
Someone asked, are these poisonous?
I don't believe so.
I think the berries are toxic to birds if they eat excessive amounts of them. And I think that's what they're probably worried about.
Well, my brother has his PhD in ecology and works for the Rhode Island Audubon Society, and I asked him about a widely publicized article that was last year or the year before about birds being poisoned by Nandina berries, and he didn't say there was good science behind that article.
Someone was asking if there was a Castanopsis near the loquat, and actually it's an oak. It's a true Quercus. It's not a Castanopsis, but it's Quercus silicina, the willow-leafed oak. It's an evergreen Asian species of oak. So that might be what you were seeing near the loquat.
And if some of the Castanopsis bloom this time of year and are quite fragrant, though I find it rather unpleasant.
Yeah.
So. But I'm not smelling any today. So if you're smelling something like a Castanopsis, I think there's probably something wrong with the fragrance app on your phone.
Tim and Doug?
Yes.
And everyone else, we've learned in some past programs that some of the birds did suffer from Nandina berries, but they did a study of the nearby landscapes and found out that the Nandina were the primary plant in all the landscapes around all those birds that had to eat those berries because there was nothing else. So definitely have some diversity in your landscape and provide them something else, and they will avoid Nandina because they don't like it. But when it's the only thing out there, that's what they have to eat. So plant something else in addition to some Nandina, and they'll be fine.
A diverse landscape is always best.
Yep.
Shall we go down and see the snowdrop?
Sure.
I think maybe we will.
I'm going to make you get dizzy here a little bit as I'm shuffling things around. But
maybe I can let you get in here.
no, you mean you worked at Montrose?
No, I mean camera-wise.
Oh, I can get in here.
In the picture. This is a snowdrop, not a snowflake. The snowdrops are galanthus, and the snowflakes are leucodiums. Snowdrops have 3 outer tepals that are usually white and 3 inner tepals that are white with various green markings. Snowflakes have 6 identical tepals, usually with a green spot at the lower end of the petal. Now, snowdrops and crocus are thought of as harbingers of spring, but really their season begins in October and November. This is the so-called giant snowdrop, Galanthus elwisii. Mrs. Elwis said she couldn't abide by people pronouncing Elwisii that way because she said we didn't wheeze. It's named for, I think her husband's name was George Elwes. Anyhow, these early forms are the variety monostictus, mono being one and stictus a spot. And I'm gonna get my hands in there and get a little rude with this snowdrop and pull back the outer two tepals so you can see there's just one heart-shaped spot in the center. Of the typical form of Elwesii would have the green spot at the lower tip of the inner tepal, and also up above that a second spot. Now, why am I using the word tepal? Tepal is a variation on petal. It's an anagram of them, but it's when the outer whorl are sepals and the inner whorl are the true petals. But when both are petalless, the term tepal is used to indicate that the sepal is petal-like as well. So this is its very first flower. You can see large numbers of buds that'll be open over the next few weeks. Snowdrops transplant very readily when they're in bloom, or in the green, as the English say, and divide them fairly frequently, and you'll have a much greater rate of increase. We're going to go on a little hike and visit some crocus that are blooming today. Oh, here's something.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't paid attention to see if it was flowering yet. Art blossoms on it.
Yeah.
I think I can get to a spot. But... Yeah.
When do you plant galanthus?
When you can get them.
Yeah. Galanthus have a reasonable reputation for not doing well when you buy dried out bulbs from the Dutch bulb vendors. If they haven't been stored too terribly long, some of them will grow, but the better way to obtain snowdrops is either container grown plants or divisions from somebody else's garden, because they transplant extremely well when they're dug up and replanted right away. So Tim's answer was, I agree with you, plant them when you can get them.
Yeah, but that one over there, let's see, I bought that one for the garden from Nancy Goodwin, and I don't know how long ago now, probably 10 or 12 years ago. And that came from like 2 bulbs, and I bought them in the green at Montrose.
In Hillsborough, North Carolina, and they probably are still selling snowdrops. But at the Pine Knot Nursery up in Clarksville, Virginia, at their occasional open houses, there's a grower from Pennsylvania that sells a wide range of snowdrop cultivars. Some of them are very expensive, but most of them will do extremely well in the garden and increase over the years. We've stood here looking at this witch hazel for half an hour now. Most people are aware of the witch hazels that bloom in the winter months. This is one of our 3 native witch hazels. The witch hazels are Hamamelis. This is Hamamelis virginiana. And this is the time of year that it blooms, in the fall.
I think this is variety Mexicana too.
Yes, it is. It's the Mexican subspecies of Hamamelis virginiana. The flowers are fragrant. These are, some other selections of the Virginia witch hazel. That's not as common in it. Have bigger flowers, but it's a pleasant shrub, either to grow in sun or as an understory plant. See, this one's gotten pretty tall, good 10 feet tall or so.
Tagetes.
Oh, yeah, we can talk about that. We talk about
whichever one. Yeah.
Chrysanthemums perhaps fit more into the end of the the frost-free growing season, the first growing season. But these late ones often straddle the time when we start having frost. Back when we tended to have frost in late October, these really late blooming chrysanthemums wouldn't even be in bloom at the time, and the tight flower buds weren't hurt by a frost. But this is Miss Gloria's Thanksgiving mum, selection by James Farmer of North Augusta, South Carolina, named for his mother, Gloria. And it's just blooms for most of November most years.
Hey, did Walt flag you?
No,
We're doing the planting store on the camera.
it's okay. I'll check in with you. And as you can see, pollinators really make use of these single chrysanthemums. I see certainly honeybees and pollinating flies and some
Moths and
butterflies and moths. Yeah, isn't that the ailanthus moth?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, that bright green thing. Okay.
There's one I like great coming up here. I know a little bit about it. Doug, you can chime in because you probably know more than me because I've only been growing it for 15 years or 14 years. But this is Tagetes lucida, Mexican tarragon. It's a marigold and it's perennial. It flowers in late October into hard frost. This is one I actually like to take, or when I get home at Thanksgiving, typically, maybe this year, maybe not. Take a bouquet of this because it's typically still flowering if we haven't had a terribly hard frost. The tarragon comes in because this smells of black licorice when you rub it, and I love that smell. It's just a really cool late season bloomer for us. Anything else about that?
Just to reiterate that it does have use in the kitchen as a substitute for tarragon, because tarragon is not something that does well in this area. I've certainly put sprigs of it in a bottle of balsamic vinegar and ended up with some really fine flavored vinegar. That's a hoverfly looking a lot like a bumblebee, but notice it just has one pair of wings rather than two. Most insects have two pairs of wings. The flies, the diptera, meaning two wings, have just one pair of wings. And I guess other creatures tend to leave them alone since they look like a bee that might sting you, but they do not, the hoverflies do not sting.
Doug and Tim?
Yep.
Gregory has asked, how well does the marigold handle temperatures below 10 degrees Fahrenheit?
It'll go dormant for us here, but it's been here for longer than I've been working here. We've had down to about 3 while I've been here, and it's been unfazed. I mean, it dies to the ground, but comes back with no problem in the spring.
You all get to count the steps that Tim and I are putting in as we take you on this tour. This is not Acer palmatum, but rather Crocus speciosa. Speciosa meaning showy. This is a readily available crocus, typically blooms all of October. The flowers this isn't its best day, but every day there's fresh flowers. You see they're fairly good sized flowers. And I want you to notice one thing, that these stamens, not the bright orange stigma, which is the female part of the flower that accepts pollen, but I don't have my glasses on, the 6 or so stamens are yellowy orange. So we're going to look at another crocus in a moment that has white stamens. But they last for years and they just get better every year. Crocus speciosus is sort of tall and floppy. I think it's often better displayed through a ground cover that's, like 3-4 inches tall, that give it a little support.
These looked better last week before was it Zeta? Before the remnants of the tropical storm hurricane came through. So they got flattened.
Doug and Tim?
Yeah.
Going back a little bit, Marilyn is asking, are there any witch hazels that drop their leaves more readily because it's a pain to cut them off?
There are certainly a few cultivars of witch hazel that tend to retain their leaves. But, it varies depending on the cultivar. There's some that I would remove from my own garden if they routinely held onto their dead leaves, but there's other varieties that are very good about shedding them. Tim, was it leaves and which ones aren't? This is Crocus pulchellus, pulchellus meaning pretty, and notice how the stamens in the center are white. That's distinguish it from its close relative, the Crocus speciosus we saw a moment ago. These are a little bit smaller than other Crocus pulchellus I've grown in the past, but a good doer, produces a long succession of flowers. There's quite a few other fall blooming crocus, fall and winter blooming crocus in the flowering lawn here and elsewhere in the Arboretum, but we don't have others to show you today.
Up the steps?
Yeah, that might be the fastest way to go.
Oh, up there, the allium would be a good one to show too.
Yeah, thank you. One of my favorite little posters.
Oh, no,
Tim?
over here though. Yeah.
Joyce has
Yes,
asked,
Chris.
when do you plant these crocus?
As soon as you can get the bulbs in the fall, typically, late summer, ideally, before they become active.
Oh.
Thank you.
All right. This is a plant I love because it starts blooming in October and will bloom into probably December when the weather turns real bitter.
I've seen it in January even.
It's an iris relative. It's in the genus Morea, M-O-R-E-A-A. No, I think I spelled that right. Polystachys, meaning many stems. You can see its kinship to iris, but it just blooms on and on.
It's been flowering for at least a month.
Yeah. I'm guessing, I think all the Moreas are South African.
There might be some that range into the Mediterranean, but I'm not certain.
Yeah, probably most of them wouldn't thrive here, but this one is just glorious every fall. I'd like to have like 100 times as much of this. See our new vine support system, waiting for some vines. I see these white flowers and think it's really dark. This is a sweet little bulb, a donation from a member, little Hyacinthioides ciliolata. We didn't know it was fall blooming, and it taught us that, about, I don't know, when
A week
did we
ago.
first see it? Just a week ago? Yeah, so a little, well, related to hyacinth and scillas and such. Ciliolata, the specific epithet, is referring to the hairs on the edge of the leaf, maybe more pronounced in other selections of this species. See, the whole thing is just, I don't know, 2 inches tall, maybe almost 3 inches tall. But there's a wonderful little allium blooming. This is a very easy, reliable allium. Doesn't bloom until this time of year, but just looks so fresh. Allium virgunculae. Don't know what that means. Variety Kilent. The foliage is tidy all summer long, and then it blooms this time of year. We raise these from seed. It's easy from seed. And these are only, well, I can tell you looking at the label, they were started from seed in 2018. So that was probably seed collected late in 2018, which is when the seed would ripen and sown. So it hasn't taken, well, they're now 2 years old.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've seen this with ice on it still flowering in the 1st of January, and it's really cool looking. But it's beautiful right now. Oh, what did you need, Chris? The last two plant?
Gregory asked, is the Iris Henryi in full sun doing well there?
Actually, I was just noticing while I was there that there's a bud on it right now. It's just pushing up. There's at least two different clones here, isn't there, Doug?
Yeah.
But there's a bud.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see if I can get it in focus here.
Yeah, Henryi is doing just fine in the sun.
It won't stay in focus while I'm have my hand in there. It's too bright. But there's a bud in that picture right there.
And we saw a flower on it, a month ago?
Yeah.
This one was planted this spring. I moved last year, or early this year, but then these two clumps are the same clone, and they've been in here, well, since 2019. So these have been in the ground for at least a year, and they're doing just fine. Like a lot of iris, you can see the old foliage is going by, but there's fresh new foliage coming up, so they're refreshing themselves this time of year. It's a small, creamy white flower.
Thank you. And then Tim and Doug, going back to the Hyacinthioides, I couldn't find that one in the record, so I don't know if we have a different name for it, but can you hold up the tags for that one? And then
here, Chris, I'll show you the accession number and you can find out. It might be Scylla now, I'm not certain, or something else.
Yeah, even Google wasn't liking it. So there you go. There's how you spell the name. I don't think it's in the records. Is that?
Look at,
and
can you look up on FileMaker, Chris?
Well, I'm not in FileMaker. I'm just on the website, so I just look at it that way.
Can you look at accession numbers on there?
I'll have to do it some other way, so I'll get there. And then the next one?
The allium?
Yeah, whatever the pink was. I totally missed that one.
Can you see that?
The allium is something that Plant Delight's nursery sells. I don't know where the Arboretum's original plant
came from. Plant Delights, yeah.
I think the Hyacinthioides might be available from
Odyssey. Is it Odyssey?
Yeah, Odyssey bulbs. Odyssey bulbs. If you've bought all the Crocus and Snowdrops, which aren't, there isn't a large diversity of a lot of bulbs in the main Dutch bulb trade. But when you want to go beyond that, Odyssey bulbs is certainly an amazing list. They might have like 100 different crocus
And
species.
that might be where those pulchellas came from. And it's possibly a wild collected one if it's from him or a specific form.
Oh, they did come from Odyssey
Yeah.
bulbs. Yes, that was that purchase of bulbs that Mark made from a member's donation. The tree dahlia, Dahlia imperialis, meaning imperial. This is a stem that fell over a couple months ago, and now the side shoots are growing back up, but you can see it's, at least 9
10,
feet
12
tall.
feet.
Oh, look at that tall stem over
Yeah.
there. Despite its great height, it is a herbaceous perennial, dies to the ground every winter. This represents the wild type flower, a big single flower, always reminds me of a cosmos. It is also can be had in white and also double forms. I wonder if the double white.
I know, I was just thinking that. We don't get flowers every year. We get some flowers most years, but it might be the day before it freezes hard. So the display doesn't last long. I think in 2015, it flowered for a full 2 weeks, and that's the longest we've had it flower. In the forecast now, it got past the frost the last 2 nights. It should be fine now for 8 or 10 days. And so this will be really nice in the next couple of weeks.
I'm not a big fan of our southern yellow pines like loblolly and stuff, but they're really great for growing things that need protection from frost, because that light canopy is enough to protect things from a frost. Working in a big camellia garden, the same camellia the flowers would come through a frosty night, but the same plant grown out in the open, the flowers would be destroyed by the frost overnight. So we have some young plants starting of this. I want to plant some under the few big pines we have, so they have that protection. This is another plant that sometimes squeaks by the early frost and can be really glorious. This is a gladiola. I don't remember this.
This is Delenii.
Dalenii, Dalenii. It's a fall blooming selection that Tony Avent named Halloweeny, though it never blooms by Halloween. It's always more of a November thing.
I always cut these and take them home for Thanksgiving. So I say it's Thanksgiving Eve more than Halloween-y.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing in bloom. But I just love the scape when it's still tight and you have these overlapping bracts. It's just such a beautiful architecture.
It'll take frost down into the mid to upper 20s. So as long as we're above 28 or so, the buds tend to be good on it. If they're open and we have a hard frost, though, they get damaged. You may have mentioned this one the last time, but
yeah. I did mention
more open now.
Yeah, I did mention this oxalis a month ago. It's Oxalis bowiei, named for somebody with the family name of Bowie. And it's a fall bloomer. It'll bloom up into a really hard frost. Big succulent leaves. Oh, and if you ever wonder why Lilium formosanum ends up many places in the garden, you can see these paper thin seeds just blow away on a breeze.
And they're always in the front 6 inches of the bed and not the back 6 feet.
They do transplant those. Let's see. Let's dip down this way.
Sure.
Do they see the garden as we walk through?
They see your back.
Oh.
I show some the garden. They might get dizzy, but they see some of it.
Oh, here's the garden.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this
Well, that's interesting. Oh, it doesn't. If you've been around a long time, you might know these plants as Ligularias, but the last couple decades have been calling these geums. And they're beautiful foliage. Know if this one is this evergreen as the other ones, but then they have these late flowers. And when we used to have frost in October, the flowers often didn't amount to much. But with frost later these days, the display is really quite beautiful. This is a selection last. I guess you're seeing. It's in the aster family along with the dahlia and so many. It's a huge family, typified by this is not one flower, but there's all the separate little disc flowers in the center, and then the ray flowers that tend to think of as petals.
Which are actually 5 petals.
Yeah, that's right.
Tim and Doug?
Yes.
Marilyn is asking how much light Farfugium or Ligularia need and how much moisture.
The light, I mean, they'll take part shade to sun, I think, and for best flowering. If it's in the sun, they'll want a little bit more water, but they do not want to be wet like a true Ligularia would. Like to be a lot moister. The Farfugiums like it well drained. Oh yeah, because we have this one down here. Actually, we're coming to another one, which right now it's getting sun, but it doesn't get much sun during the summer. I think this is Farfugium japonicum. Is it variety formosanum?
Yeah.
And this is in summer deep shade. It's starting to open up now with the.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're pretty versatile.
And it's looking like it's a little bit thirsty. The foliage looks a little wilted. This is a dry part of Asian Valley. And as Tim said, it's variety formosanum. And that knowing what they're referring to can be a little bit tricky, because the country of Taiwan used to be called Formosa. So something labeled Formosanum could be from Formosa, now known as Taiwan, but Formosa means beautiful. We were just looking at the seeds of Lilium formosanum, which is probably meant regarding to its origin, but Formosa could also refer to something that's beautiful. But I also wanted to point out this aster. Aster ageraetoides. We are in the part of the Arboretum known as Asian Valley, so as you would guess, this is an Asian aster. It's a little bit past its peak, but Tim and I are both impressed by the fact that it blooms so well in this rather dark, dry, shady area.
In the summer, this is really dark.
And really dry. We have the exact same aster out in full sun, and it's just as happy, if not happier, out there.
We have a couple name forms too, but not like this is a different subspecies, or variety. But and I think it's Ego Marasaki is the purple one, and then there's a white one, Ashby, yeah, which is a little bit larger floret.
Violet. They don't see us take the shortcut, right? I don't know where you want to photograph this Farfugium. This is also Farfugium japonicum. This is the cultivar that's probably most widely known, Oreo maculatum. Oreo meaning yellow, maculatum, spotted. It's a very odd spotting, but it is this plant that gives Farfugium japonicum its common name, leopard plant. Someone was asking about the plant cart earlier. One of the plants on it is another selection of this species, Farfugium japonicum shishi botan, and its leaf is solid green but extremely curly, like curly parsley. Very beautiful foliage plant. I think shishi is referring to a lion's mane, and that would certainly acknowledge the very roughly green leaves on the plant.
And I think the last time Doug and I did our tour, he mentioned the begonia, and he said, oh, we should leave it for the seed pods. And right now, there's some seed pods right behind this in the begonia grandis, which are really actually quite attractive right now.
And they'll stand all winter long, provided an ice storm doesn't snap them off. Jim, you always feel free to say stop. You know, in our jogging through the garden this afternoon, we walked past a lot of plants that already have flower buds. This is a Stachyurus, one of the spike tails, Stachyurus salicifolia, which means foliage like a salix, a willow. But this is why you stop pruning plants in late summer, early fall, because by then, a lot of the early blooming things already have flower buds on them. These won't open until probably
February,
April?
or no, I'd say February or March.
Okay.
Probably March.
Yeah.
But the Stachyurus, I think as soon as they're done flowering, they already are forming the new buds for the next year. So by May, or by April, late April, they're already having buds for the following year.
Yeah. Let's see.
Which does make it a little bit of a challenge, but.
Tim, which one was that?
That was Stachyurus salicifolia.
Thank you.
We saw Galanthus elwissii. This is Galanthus reginae Olgae. Reginae Olgae referring to Queen Olga of, I need to check.
Greece, I think.
Of Greece or Turkey. And this is definitely a fall blooming one. It's like a lot of the spider lilies, they bloom before they put up foliage, but you can see this is starting to put up foliage, which will be present all winter into early spring. It's very fragrant. I don't know if you can get a whiff of it. It's a species that I've grown. I don't currently grow any. I'm in between gardens, but I grew it for many decades and it just got better every year. And my goodness, people would admire it and go home with a few bulbs, so it's very tolerant of being divided. But a real gem in the fall garden.
The Aurelia or the Fatsias.
Oh, sure. You want to talk about it? They're fun.
Yeah, right now the Fatsias are beginning to flower. This is Fatsia japonica, and I don't remember the selection on this one. This is one I think Tony Avent gave us that came from Dan Hinckley, if I remember correctly. It had, yeah, that's exactly right. The leaf on this is a little bit different. It's not, it's thicker. It's almost, the veins are pressed on it. I don't know if you can see that on my camera here, but they're actually settled in a little bit. It's just, but it's really grown vigorously. I think we've had it like 4 or 5 years now, but it was just real small. Pardon?
Is that Sparky?
I don't know. What bed does it show?
L01.
That would be correct then. But it's coming into flower right now.
It's a member of the Aurelia family with English ivy is also a member of that family. And in my experience, it's when they're in bloom, pollinators really make a lot of use of the flowers. You can see various pollinators on this today. I didn't know we had a cultivar name on it.
Yeah, I didn't know we had a name on it yet either. I don't think it's not out yet, but our polymorpha is in bud as well. On the other side, I'd noticed a shoot going up, but I don't see it.
Polycarpa.
Yeah, polycarpa. This is the other species from Taiwan.
Yeah.
It's not as far along, but it's coming into bud. If it flowers, it'll be the first time we've had it flower. So this is wild collected that Mark collected it, but the leaf on these is spectacular.
Yeah, I love the foliage, the way it has this big sinus towards the base of the lobes of the leaves. It's a real pretty thing.
It hasn't been as hardy as Japonica, but the last couple mild winters have really allowed it to grow well here. It's getting very large. I think we have to take a few cuttings of it this winter. Oh, yeah. That's the most I've seen on that one for a while.
Yeah, fall is also, late summer, fall is, I'm going to try to move some of these fern fronds out from this. Late summer, fall is when the cyclamen season blooms, and if you grow several different species, you can have them in bloom from August into March, maybe even April, probably April. This is Cyclamen silicium. It's a smaller species. The plant's especially small. This, it's just starting to put out foliage, but another month from now, it'll probably cover the ground here with its foliage.
Oh, I got good seedlings.
Oh yeah.
Right here and over here.
Yeah. We'll just jump to the other side of the path.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, this is Cyclamen coum, and I love Cyclamen coum because it starts blooming usually late December, and I'm not a big fan of that season that happens in late December, and so it's nice to have something really cheerful in the garden at that time. And they'll bloom all winter long, even through the coldest part of winter into March. Flowers are typically a really bright cerise or magenta, but there are other color selections. But that bright color is really stands out in the garden on a gray winter day. There is a camellia here.
Yeah.
Oh, it's an India?
We talked about it, and it's getting late for it.
Yeah. Fall is certainly the beginning of the Camellia season. And, the typical fall Camellia is Camellia sasanqua, but this is actually a Japonica. Most Japonicas are winter into early spring blooming, but there are some fall blooming Japonicas. This is, let's see, Fury Benton. Benton is referring to red. And I believe this is a variegated, you got it?
There, I do now.
This, I believe, is a variegated sport of an ancient Japanese camellia called Daikagara, but don't quote me on that. This one is really slow growing.
Yeah, we've had it for a long time. This is actually grafted.
So that's a whole
We don't have too many grafted camellias in here.
Oh, I know. Let's look at the Cyclamen Africanum, because that's
I don't even know. I don't know if it truly is or not, but
I have some information.
Oh, good. We got the seed from Nargs from this, so the Rock Garden Society. But oh wow, it's gorgeous right now, though. I will say that.
Now, this is, I should get my shadow out. This is supposed to be Cyclamen africanum, which is very closely related to Cyclamen heterofolium, which we will see this afternoon as well. Cyclamen africanum you would not expect to be winter hardy, but I don't know if I can see an accession number on this label. No, it looks like that part of the label has.
It's from the same year as the Cyclamen cum and the Cyclamen silicium.
Okay, well,
I grew them from seed all around the same time.
Now, one of the things that distinguishes Cyclamen africanum from heterofolium, and this will become clearer when we're poking at a Cyclamen heterofolium, is that Cyclamen heterofolium, the leaf petioles, the leaf stalks are, sort of sprawl out from the tuber real far. And Cyclamen heterofolium typically makes this tight.
I mean, africanum?
Yeah, africanum. Thank you, Tim. Cyclamen africanum makes this tight, mound of foliage. The foliage isn't widely spreading.
I did not know that. Great.
Cyclamen heterofolium, even regardless how big the tuber is, the petioles are going to wander out another 6-8 inches from the tuber. And now you might say, well, it's spreading all here, but no, these are all seedlings. So this is growing like Cyclamen africanum should grow.
That's wonderful.
I've
been wondering for the last 6 or 8 years probably.
Yeah, and Cyclamen heterofolium is typical of the northern Mediterranean, and africanum, as you would guess, is from the the other side of the Mediterranean Ocean in North Africa. It's not the only cyclamen species that occurs in Africa.
How well does the Cyclamen hold up? As far as I can tell, on this one, it has stayed evergreen. That's why I've always wondered if it was actually heterofolium. It's never died back for us.
You mean in the summer?
In the winter.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's supposedly much more frost intolerant.
Yeah. Well, that's why I always thought it couldn't possibly be africanum, because it's been surviving the winter, but it has the typical growth habit of africanum. And a few steps from here, I'll point out the heterofolium. I should say that these all of the cyclamen, except for Cyclamen purpurascens, are dormant in the summer. They die away, they completely disappear, and then they're mostly making use of winter moisture in their natural habitats, so they grow through the frosted part of the year, fall, winter, and early spring. But Cyclamen purpurascens is native to the Alps, where it's probably semi-dormant in a cold winter, but then grows through the summer months and blooms through the summer months.
Yeah, the other one we were talking about was heterofolium in particular, but we mentioned a whole bunch of other ones, but that was the key one. It's typically very similar to africanum.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one that we don't have a story on. This one popped up on its own, actually.
Yeah, but this,
you can see the habit.
I'm sure, is one plant.
Yeah. Because
the foliage is all identical. And this is a typical shape for Cyclamen heterofolium, which means ivy-leafed. And, there are so many garden selections of heterofolium with other shapes and coloring of leaves, but a wild Cyclamen heterofolium is going to have this ivy-shaped leaf. But it's been blooming for a while. This is fun. I'm going to ruin Tim's day and pick one of these. But the Cyclamen, most of the species, when they're done blooming, the flower stalk curls down, and then the fruit is produced at the ground level, probably a little bit more protected than if it was up in the air. And the fruit are getting ripe, and you can harvest the seed when this tight coil relaxes. The fruit are ripe enough to harvest at that time. But see, this is the center of the plant right here, and these leaves have traveled out far.
Way back in there. Yeah. And I don't know if it's connected, but there's one even further than that. But
no, there is a second plant. But you can see this leaf. I'm going to trace it back to the crown of the plant. And you see that petiole is, what is that? Almost 8 inches long.
Yep.
And you see this growth habit is very different from
over there,
the supposed africanum over there.
Someone was asking about persicum, which hardy forms of that. I haven't managed to keep one for very long. I know Tony Avent has some. He has them in a really sheltered location at his new house, and I think they're growing in gravel and a breezeway. But I haven't managed to keep them.
Now, in tracing this leaf back, I dislodged a seedling. This, I would tend to think was. Do you think that'd already be from the last year's seed?
That's
or
from last year's, yeah.
Yeah.
That's last year's.
So you see, Cyclamen are dicots. I know there's that horrible botanical term. Dicots, again, di meaning two, are the flowering plants that have two seed leaves. But the really curious thing about a cyclamen, I don't know if any other plants do that. When you start them from seed, there'll only be one leaf because the second leaf immediately starts to form this tuber. You know, what we might, in a generic way, refer to as the bulb. And if your cyclamen are producing seedlings in the garden, I've often transplanted them at this size. So don't be reluctant to do it. Just transplant them to, you know, some other location where they will have the right growing conditions.
Here's a new seedling right here. That one's probably from last fall. This is a brand new one here.
Here's
but yeah,
older one.
Right there. But and it seems like, did you say about the second cotyledon? I think it just forms into the tuber or something, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's I thought that's
what you said.
Doug?
I wasn't paying attention. I was digging. What, Chris?
Cyclamen have enlarged hypocotyls.
Yep.
And
all right,
what
so with the hypocotyl
was asking, can they be divided? Joyce was. I'm not too sure if you can cut one of the enlarged hypocotyls apart into pieces and get anything out of it, can you?
You can carefully. You have to have a big one to do it from. I'm guessing, like, sometimes they'll get the size of a small plate.
Yeah.
And you can literally cut them.
Sandwich plate.
As long as you have the apical meristem and I think part of the root meristem, you can get it to take. But they'll often treat the cuts, I think, with fungicide to keep them from rotting, and you let them cure for a few days, is what I've been told. I've never actually done it.
If you start looking into the cyclamen, the cultivated cyclamen world, you will see what appeared to be many different cultivated varieties of them. But what they are seed strains. So you might have like Ashwood silver-leafed white flower seed strain, and most of the seedlings grown from that seed will have silver leaves and white flowers, but they're not a true cultivar because they're not produced asexually. They're produced from seed. But I don't think there's any commercial growing of cyclamen by dividing the tuber. I think you said, Tim, there is someone doing tissue culture.
Yeah, they're doing a few. Dan Hines had done a few combs with in tissue culture and named them.
But talk about the second growing season. This is a Daphne. I don't think it's fragrant in bloom, but this is a super curious shrub because it loses its leaves come summer. The beginning gardener probably growing it for the first time thinks it's dead and rips it out. Elizabeth Lawrence almost did that with her Clematis serosa, which has the same lifestyle of dropping its leaves in summer. And then come fall, it puts out new foliage, which it'll have until next summer. And this particular Daphne will be in bloom shortly.
It waits until like February. It's crazy how long it takes to actually open on this thing.
Really?
Yes.
And
here's
the label.
I think, yes, here we go. Pseudo Meservium. I can't spit it out. Meserium, thank you.
Maybe. Daphne Meserium is another species of Daphne.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, this one, it's always, is that dead? Can we pull that out in the summer, our volunteers? And I have to remind them, nope, that one's not dead.
And thank goodness Mary Ann's not looking watching this Zoom, because she would see that we've gotten a little bit behind on labeling the garden. Hello, Mary Ann. I
need to.
Yeah.
I need to spray.
We mentioned camellias. If anybody had, there's a good flower. If anybody had iced tea at lunchtime?
I
This
did.
is what you were drinking. Oh, that's why Tim is all keyed up. He had iced tea at lunchtime.
I'm not as keyed up as yesterday.
I run on caffeine. Tim most days zooms by without it. He's amazing. But this is Camellia sinensis, which is the source of tea. The true tea, not a herbal infusion, but tea. What is now known as, the Camellia family is the Thea, Thea from the Chinese common name for tea. But taxonomists decided that Camellia sinensis or Thea sinensis was sufficiently closely related to other members of the genus Camellia that it should not be in its own genus, but should be lumped with the other Camellias. But this is the source of green, black, and white tea. It all depends on how you handle the leaves after you pick them. I think those were the highlights in the left. Can you think of anything?
I'm just looking.
Oh,
Is it pushing up yet? I can't tell yet. Okay. Yeah, that's probably good.
I don't. How are we doing?
It's just after 2.
Oh, well then.
We should move on.
Okay. My goodness, these scrapings have done it really.
Yeah,
Okay.
but they were going at it for so long.
Yeah.
And the foliage is so cool on those. We showed those last month as well as
but they weren't blooming.
Oh, that's right, they weren't.
Yeah.
And this seems to be a fall flowering one.
Yeah. Through the much appreciated generosity of Tony Avent and Plant Delights Nursery and Juniper Level Botanic Garden, we got a flat of this pelargonium. Pelargoniums are usually called geraniums, but they're not the true geraniums in the genus of that name. But this is an African pelargonium, Pelargonium transvalensis, and the cultivar is African princess. And we've enjoyed it for months for the beautiful foliage. You see it is related to the florist geraniums, which are called zonal geraniums because of these zones of color in the leaf. But we didn't know it was such a pretty bloomer this time of year. And the Cyclamen header following in the lath house wasn't blooming, and these are past their peak because they've been blooming for months. They're getting a little bit buried by the freshly falling pine needles, but this is Cyclamen heterofolium is a reliable performer in late summer and fall. Cyclamen heterofolium is the easiest one to grow in gardens. It's more tolerant of summer wet. Some of the other species need to be they certainly need to be in a spot in the garden that's not irrigated on a regular basis. You know, the water runs because it's Tuesday or some regimen like that. But the other ones, provided they have good drainage, they're quite easy to grow. But in Cyclamen heterofolium, such a beautiful foliage plant that it's a treasure in the garden all winter long as well.
We start getting flowers on these. I've seen them I think now the end of May, maybe even or early June, I've seen flowers on the heterofoliums. And then I've seen them as late as January, and then you have the foliage, which again lasts until April at least, if not into early May. And so you have how many months? About 11 months of interest out of these things.
Oh, look, somebody's
Yeah, that little Calibracoa that survived.
Yeah. So it's up to 2.
So probably till 2:30.
Okay. Well, why don't we run over and look at
Camellias. And I don't see any. None of the Koreans are out yet. That's what I was just looking at.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
Oh, there's a plant we need to talk about right there for the fall season. Yes.
Yeah.
This is a fun one, and the
Oh, look at all
pollinators
the-
adore it.
Look at all the honeybees on it.
And if you could smell this one, I always have people ask them to tell me what taste like this smells. If you were here and you could smell this, actually, Tony Avon, someone who told me this, that never hit me before. This smells like Tootsie Rolls. This is Verbicena microptera that has winged stems. Oh, I can smell it right now. But
Yeah.
the pollinators adore it. It only typically flowers from right at the end of October until a hard frost. So, but it's a little grower, 8 to 10 feet tall. So it does need a little bit of space. It's I believe a northern Mexican species.
And it's Verbicena, not Verbena. It's one of those situations where there's pretty similar names. And it's like, do I mean Pennisetum or Penstemon? But I grow the plant as a beautiful foliage plants. The leaves are in pairs, a lot like a silphium. On these winged stems, the specific epithet, Microptera, Ptera, is referring to wings. You can see the broad wing on the stem. But it's also making the point that if you're planting things for pollinators, they this time of year they need to be in the sun because the pollinators aren't going to visit things that are lost in the shade. But this is a south-facing location, so it's in sun all afternoon. We're some asters. Maybe we'll run on to.
Okay.
Tim and Doug,
Yes.
Wendy is asking about how big was that last plant, the Texas crown beard you just showed, about 6 feet by 6 feet was her question?
It was probably 8 to 10 feet. And then it starts to flop whenever you have a windstorm like we had the other day. So you need to have a 30-foot wide hole to fill. It's not for a small garden, but it's a really cool plant.
These are plants of Camellia japonica. Camellia japonica, despite its name, isn't native just to Japan, but it's most widely dispersed of all the maybe almost 300 species of camellias that are native to Asia. It's some of the most cold hardy forms of Camellia japonica were selected from an island off of the coast of Korea. But these are ones that I believe predated even JC's time. And they look like wild type Camellia japonica, but we can't be 100% sure since there's no record of them. But having started now, these will bloom certainly up to Christmas and into January.
I've seen these go, I think, if it's cool, up into March.
Yeah.
These flower for a long time, these single red ones.
Now, I love both these simple single flowers and many of the large flowered doubly ones. But if you like simpler things, then these wild type japonicas are really charming. They're very elegant. This one starts a little bit later, but its flowers are a darker, deeper red. That one's showing a bit of purple, which is fine. I couldn't find it.
Is it Winter Starlight or something? At least one of them, and there could be a seedling or two in here too. Is something I've often thought. So,
the late Dr. William Ackerman was breeding camellias at the National Arboretum in DC, and he was breeding mostly for fragrance. Fragrance, you say? Well, yeah, Camellia japonica lacks fragrance, except for a few cultivars. And Camellia sasanqua has a fragrance, but it's not one that I enjoy. But amongst the many hundred species of Camellia, there are some species that are very fragrant. One of them is a Japanese species, Camellia luchuensis. The Luchu Islands are also the same as, I believe I'm right, the Kyushu Islands is one of those places that has many different variations in the way that it's spelled. And it has a tiny white flower, but it very powerfully scented. But with the big freeze in, what was that, 85? Almost all the camellias at the National Arboretum, and they have a large collection of camellias, died to the ground as they did in this area. And so his boss said, you need to change the focus of your breeding work and breed for winter hardiness. And so working with another species of camellia that's a single white one, Camellia oleifera, and some of the few camellias that survived the deep freeze of 1985, he started producing hybrids that are potentially winter hardy into zone 6. Before then, the most cold hardy camellias were hardy only into zone 7. And I think it was his very first one, is Snow Flurries, which is a double white one. We probably won't see it today. It's off in the White Garden. But then he started naming all these ones with a two-part name. The first part of the name being winter, like winter's snowman, winter's icicle, that kind of stuff. And this is one of them. This small white one, I'm guessing might be a seedling.
Yeah.
And then there's a pale pink.
There's a pale pink back right there too.
Yeah.
There could be a complex of seedlings here.
Camellia oleifera, the specific epithet oleifera, meaning bearing oleo, oil. And in Asia, the seeds of certain species of camellia are collected and pressed for oil. It's a very high quality oil. It's monosaturated like olive oil. So one that's very, very good for in a healthy diet. But unlike olive oil, holds up to high heat, so it can be better oil for cooking. But because it holds up to high heat, it also has use in industry, like in engines that function at really high temperatures. It's also used a lot for cosmetics. The time I was in China in late fall, on the concrete pavement outside of garages and houses out in the country, there was often a big pile of camellia fruit, I guess curing in the sun before they were pressed for oil. It's often sold as tea oil, but must not be confused with tea tree oil, which is eucalyptus relative and which is not edible.
Melaleuca.
Yeah, Melaleuca, thank you. But both Camellia sasanqua and Camellia oleifera will grow in full sun. And so if you don't have a shady garden, you can grow these fall blooming camellias. Camellia japonica will tolerate sun, but is a bit happier in part sun to light shade. You can certainly put Camellia sasanqua and oleifera in shade that's too dark, and then the plants will be real scrawny and won't flower well. But I think these camellias just aren't seen enough in gardens. What else is this showy in the fall and winter months? I think we're too far away from other camellias.
There's oleifera right over here outside the White Garden.
You can look at it, but it wasn't blooming yet.
I think it's on top, not down low. I can see it from here. Oh, here's something we can talk about. Yes, and they're starting to, these are early to me.
Yeah, I always think of them more December. This hybrid Mahonia ex media winter sun reminds me that I really need to thank all of you who supported the JC Raulston Arboretum through purchase of plants in our recent fall plant sale. And this is one of the plants we had in the sale, the winter sun Mahonia. These Mahonias are beautiful architectural plants, and the flowers are a nice bonus. And I agree with Tim that these seem to be blooming about a month earlier than normal. These flowers are very fragrant, sort of a lily of the valley fragrance.
Not as good as japonica though.
Most years they try to start blooming in December, and then the flowers get destroyed by frost. But a good point to make as we stand next to these plants that these Mahonia media hybrids get very large. You see, it's probably 9 feet tall.
Yeah.
And these hybrids are also much more sun tolerant than the leatherleaf Mahonia, which is common in gardens, which is a tough plant, so it won't die in the sun, but the foliage will look miserable. These might give the appearance of being shaded by these tall pines, but they're on the south side of these pines, so they're in sun pretty much all day, or at least all afternoon. And you see the foliage still looks nice and green. 219.
Tim and Doug?
Yes.
You had a question about pruning Mahonia. They'd like to know, or Joyce would like to know, when do you prune Mahonia?
You don't, Mahonias do not need pruning on a regular basis. Why is Joyce pruning them? You can prune them to maintain their size, but they do not need regular pruning. And thank you for the question, because I'll say the same thing about camellias. Camellias are trees. They are not deciduous shrubs like a spirea or a forsythia that benefit from yearly renewal pruning. Camellias are trees. They have permanent stems. If you choose the selections so it grows to its ultimate size is appropriate to the location, you really shouldn't have to ever prune them. The same is true of Mahonias. Gardeners need to need to understand that some plants, many plants, do not need regular pruning. You know, I think some gardeners wake up on a Saturday morning and think I need to go outside and chop on something, but there are a whole lot of plants that do not need regular pruning.
She said they're about 5 years old, and yeah, I would have to agree with Doug. I mean, these are probably 30 years old and have had little to no trimming done to them, or maybe only 20 years, but still, if you do take them out, you just have, you ever pruned a Nandina, you prune the cane back to you prune the canes back, and they'll branch out where you prune them.
Yeah, I'm not saying there isn't an occasion where you might need to prune something. You know, it's grown too far out on the path, it's blocking your window. You know, the best thing might be to relocate it to where it'll have room to grow. But yeah, on something like a Mahonia with many, many stems, if it's too tall, then cut the tallest stems back and leave the shorter ones. Don't chop on the whole plant. I was driving through Durham a couple years ago, and there was a split rail fence, and it looked like this split rail fence was sporting yellow flowers, and I realized what it was. They had a Mahonia planted at each fence post, but they had pruned the Mahonia so tight that I didn't even notice the plant was there, but there were the yellow flowers. Or, you know, maybe you see the sad situation where somebody has taken shears to a Nandina or a Mahonia, and it's now this green meatball. And, you know, you don't have any of the natural, beautiful growth habit of the plant, just the green meatball. So if you need to reduce their size, don't chop the whole plant back, but just cut out some of the longest stems,
selected canes only.
Yeah.
Tim and Doug, Joyce has come back and said she just has a branch sticking out too close to the driveway.
Oh, exactly then. Yeah.
Absolutely cut that off. It doesn't, and this time of year, it would be fine time to do it.
Or and you can stick that as a cutting. You can take an enormous piece of Mahonia and stick it as a cutting. That's how we got all the ones we sold in the plant sale. I don't trim them often, but I'll trim them and use them as cuttings. Oh, yeah. Oh, here's Camellia oleifera. Let's see if I can make it so we can see this. Oh.
Yeah, this is Camellia oleifera. Again, the oil seed camellia. It's a close relative to Camellia sasanqua. Camellia sasanqua is native to Japan. Sasanqua is actually a corruption of the Japanese common name, Sazanka. I'm not at all sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Camellia oleifera is native to China, and I saw, plantations of it where it was planted for seed production. You can see the trunks are slightly cinnamon colored, and being a tree, those trunks are permanent for the life of the tree. So it is one of those things that if a cold winter or a bulldozer cut it to the ground, it's going to regrow. So it is tolerant to being cut back hard, but it does not need regular pruning.
It's like crepe myrtles. You get the beautiful bark the longer you leave it.
I didn't see any of those here.
I'm going to stand back here first.
The Buddleia loricata would be great in the white garden. It's so silvery. This big guy is a butterfly bush, a Buddleia. It's obviously not the everyday Buddleia Davidii or similar hybrid. But this is Buddleia. I read the label earlier and I've forgotten its name. It's not Loric.
No, Cordata.
Cordata. I should have remembered that. I'm trying to figure out what's cordate about it. Cordate is referring to heart-shaped, and
yeah, the leaves aren't heart-shaped.
Usually something named cordata has a deep sinus here, so it looks like a heart on a Valentine. But it's a variable species, and one of the subspecies becomes a very large tree in frost-free climate. That's a little bit more cordate.
It is in flower. I'm actually showing you the blossoms. They're really spectacular.
A great big inflorescence, very tiny, fairly non-colorful flowers, but interesting. We enjoy it as a foliage plant all year round. It's fairly evergreen.
Well, yeah, only the coldest winters takes it down.
Yeah. Where to from here?
It's up to you.
Why don't we quick go to the winter
garden? Sure.
Yeah.
We can take the shortcut.
Yeah.
You're even taking a shorter cut. No one will know. Oh, no. Oh, we were talking about Stachyurus earlier. Here's Stachyurus Himalaic, if I can get the flower stalks in view. Again, this one won't flower till February, March. But it's been in bud since June, probably.
And you might think these inflorescents would be, real flexible, but they're really rather stiff. I don't know if you can see that. But an elegant plant. The flowers are small, yellowy green flowers.
And there's winter sun again. I did trim this one last year because it was getting enormous. And that's where your cuttings came from for if you bought any in the plant sale. Winter interlude.
Yeah, this is another one of Dr. Ackerman's cold hardy camellias. It's gotten rather tall, so when it's in full bloom, it does make quite a show, but most of it's overhead.
Yeah, this is filled in over the years. It's no longer, this was probably a lot sunnier when it was planted.
What was the camellia, Tim?
That was, I believe, interlude, winter interlude.
I am not finding winter interlude in the records.
I think it, try, look in the ones in the E19s and E20s. See, it's one of the winters.
Yeah, and this is the one I mentioned earlier, snow flurries. I'm guessing it was named before Dr. Ackerman decided to start starting all their names with winter. But it's a very vigorous, broad, wide-spreading cultivar, reliable performer. We lost another giant in the camellia world this summer. Dr. Clifford Parks, retired botanist from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, died. And he was an internationally recognized expert on camellias. But after the big freeze of 1985, he started breeding for winter hardiness as well. And many of his are in the April series. They're largely pure Japonicas, but ones that have developed in very cold climate. This is April Tris, which is an anemone flowered red one. The big guard petals and then the pom-pom of small petaloids in the center.
And it's kind of saying, I don't like that I'm in the sun now since we took down the holly hedge.
Yeah,
it's a little yellowy green.
Yeah. The Nellie R. Stevens made this garden very shady.
Tim?
Yes.
Did that last one been Winter's Dream?
That could be.
Oh, the pink one?
Yeah. There's two winters out here in the winter garden.
Of course, there's some plants that belong to all 12 months of the year. This beautiful conifer. Tell me what it is. Tim.
This is, Cupressus.
Funibris?
Yes, thank you, Funibris.
Yeah.
The coffin cypress. So, this is for Halloween the other night.
Yeah.
Or Day of the Dead.
Yeah. Maybe not the most cheerful common name, coffin cypress, but these curtains of green foliage, just so elegant.
Yes, it's really graceful.
Great big thing. But parting the curtain, we come across this Camellia, Rose of Autumn. I almost named it Winter. Dr. Clifford Parks, well, let me go back one step. The wild Camellia sasanqua is always white, and it's always a single bloom, but you expect single blooms in the wild. And the flowers are fairly small. He thinks the sasanquas of gardens, many generations ago, probably got a little blood from some Camellia japonicas, which are typically red. And that's where the red and pink pigment of the sasanquas of gardens, that's where that pigment came from. And so some people call these Camellia sasanquas Camellia hymalis. And, perhaps that's the way to go, that only the wild type sasanquas should be called Camellia sasanqua. But when you see the name Camellia hymalis, it's essentially the same thing as the other Sasanquas of gardens. This is one bred by Bobby Green of Green Nursery in Fairhope, Alabama, right on the Mobile Bay. And it's a real lovely and good doer. There's another group of hybrid camellias known as Camellia X vernalis, and they don't have just a little touch of japonica in them, but there are definitely crosses between japonica and Sasanqua, and they generally don't start blooming this early, but certainly by the end of the year. And they are really marvelous plants. They have much greater sun tolerance than their japonica parent. They have the lovely darker foliage of the Sasanqua parent, and they are very vigorous. Sasanquas are vigorous. Japonicas are often slow. They're sort of slow and steady, but the vernalis are real vigorous. This is not the most vigorous growth, but you can see up here, they've made, 18 inches of new growth this year. And you can grow these out in full sun.
And I put it in full shade, not knowing it at that time.
That's fine.
It does flower. This one is actually, it's a viral one, and it has white flowers with, pink flowers with white splotches.
Yeah, and Tim probably just scared you all when he said it was viral. And this
it has COVID.
Yes, I put a mask on the camellia. This kind of yellow mottling in the leaf of the camellia is caused by that same virus that causes the flowers to be mottled with white. It is caused by a virus. It's something that's far from lethal to the plant. And people who exhibit camellias in camellia shows have often intentionally introduced that virus into camellias. So when they have a new variety of camellias, they don't have just the solid red or the solid pink one to exhibit, but they also have the pink or white one that's now mottled with the virus, which is the work of the virus. They introduced the virus largely by grafting a stem of the new variety onto an understock that is known to be virused. In some countries, some camellia societies in other countries don't allow the exhibition of virused camellias. Now, if you have a camellia that has stripes of color, that is not caused by a virus. That is a genetic mutation. And that can be a fun one, because on the same plant, you can have solid red flowers, solid white flowers, and flowers that are striped with various amounts of red or white or pink and white.
I think I need to correct something. I said earlier, I think coffin cypress for the funiferous, and Chris then looked up the wrong name. He said Taiwania cryptomerioides. That's the next plant over. It's the plant that we showed was Cupressus funebris with an F, F-U-N.
That's what I was thinking, Tim.
Yeah, so I don't remember. I was thinking it had something like coffin in it too, but maybe it doesn't. It's common name.
It's the mourning cypress.
That's it. Mourning as in death, someone's death. I knew there was something morbid there. Oh, this one's starting.
Yeah.
We're getting in range though. There's a bunch of them.
Isn't this greens, blues?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, this is another Camellia sasanqua. Oh my.
Yeah.
Wow.
It doesn't look as blue on the screen as it does there in person.
This is another sasanqua, or hymalis if you prefer that name. Also from Bobby Green of Green Nursery in Fairhope, Alabama. Greens, blues. Under some conditions, sometimes of the year or whatever, it's not anywhere near this blue, but it's looking extremely bluish today.
I don't think I've seen it this good before.
A very grayed sort of lavender blue. Yeah, I see it on this Tim's screen now, and it looks very pink.
Yeah,
It really is
it's a blue lavender.
sort of lilac, lavender, slightly silvery grade.
Yeah.
I hope at home you're seeing the color far truer than this. I believe that the blue is also influenced the same way that the blue in hydrangeas is influenced by the availability of aluminum. You can grow hydrangeas or blue camellias in very acid soil, but if there's no aluminum in the soil, they're not going to show any of the blue pigment, because you can grow a variety of this in a standard, very acid pine bark and sand potting mix where there's no clay, which would be the source of the aluminum, and they will not have any blue in them. But this soil is rich in clay, so it's rich in aluminum. And in acid soil, the aluminum is available. How does this look at home? Does this look blue to anybody?
Well, we can certainly tell the color is not normal, Doug.
Well, I say purple.
Yeah, it has a very purple cast to it.
It looks blue to me.
Yeah, it's as blue as they get. That's what I'd say. You know, like a blue rose. It's not quite blue, but
yeah, I don't know. Well,
but I mean, that's the bluest I've seen them look to me.
Yeah.
And on here, it does not look it.
There's a big old, this is an appropriate story for election day. I know you didn't want to be reminded that it's election day, but there's a big old Japonica cultivar called Roosevelt Blues. And the person who named it was disappointed because Roosevelt got a third term. And I guess at that point he had a new camellia to name. And so that's how it got named Roosevelt Blues.
What color is it?
It's this color.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, it's a big Japonica, but it can be this sort of gray, silvery lavender blue. Well, have we used up our allotted time?
How are we doing for time, Chris?
Well,
Time has expired by 10 minutes.
That's what we thought. Okay.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Thanks for
Thank
following
you
along
so
with
very
us.
much, Doug and Tim.
Hopefully I didn't make too many people sick.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys.
You're welcome.
Thanks
Yep,
so
thank
much.
you so much.
Thanks. I needed a walk through the garden.
I love it.
Okay, we're
Thank you.
going out. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.